Imagine your business finally hits the tipping point. Like, the product is clicking, sales are absolutely exploding, and your inbox is just full of partnership requests.
Right, the dream scenario.
Exactly. You have officially won the startup lottery.
Yeah.
But your reward for all this success, you can basically never take a day off. You can never get sick.
Oh, yeah.
And you can never, ever step away from your smartphone camera again. Because the minute your literal physical face disappears from the social media feed, your lead generation just stops.
It completely flatlines.
Right. You are trapped in a prison of your own viral success. Welcome to our deep dive, everyone. I'm your host, and joining me today is our resident marketing expert.
Hi, everyone. Glad to be here. And honestly, that scenario you just described, it is the terrifying, unspoken reality for thousands of entrepreneurs right now.
Yeah, they don't talk about it.
They really don't.
Yeah.
They built this massive audience by being raw and authentic and present. And in doing so, they inadvertently transform themselves into the single biggest bottleneck their company will ever face.
Which is exactly what we are dismantling today. So whether you are a founder staring down the barrel of total burnout, or maybe a marketing director who is terrified of how much your bonus relies on your boss's mood.
We've all been there.
Right. Or even if you are just someone fascinated by the hidden mechanics of how these digital empires actually operate, this deep dive is going to fundamentally rewire how you think about online brand building.
Absolutely.
Our source material today is this incredibly dense, highly tactical masterclass published on the Whoop Social blog. It's titled Shifting from Founder-Led to Brand-Led Social, and it was penned by their Chief Marketing Officer, Frank Heidenreich.
And, Frank brings this level of operational paranoia to this topic that is just incredibly refreshing. We are not dealing with theoretical marketing fluff here at all.
No, not at all.
This is a blueprint that's been forged over 14 years across something like 230 different companies spanning 14 countries. He has taken brands from absolute zero to millions of organic views. Yeah. So when he outlines a framework for surviving this transition, it is because he has actually seen what happens when companies try to wing it and just spectacularly fail.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because right out of the gate, Frank acknowledges a hard truth that every marketer knows, but rarely admits out loud.
Which is?
That a founder's face is undeniably the ultimate growth hack. In the early days, you actually want that dependency.
Oh, for sure. You need it.
But you have to know when to pull the ripcord. And to do that, we really first have to understand why the founder is such a potent weapon in the first place.
Yeah, and the potency really comes down to three deeply ingrained factors, right? Psychological and technological ones. The first is just fundamental human trust.
Like biologically.
Exactly, biologically. We are wired to trust a human face, a human voice, and a human story. We simply do not trust vector graphics. We don't trust corporate logos. When a founder gets on camera and explains why they built a product, there's this immediate subconscious assumption of skin in the game. Like, if the product fails, this person's reputation burns. A corporate entity doesn't bleed, but a founder does.
That makes total sense. And building on that biological wiring, there is this sheer, unadulterated speed of execution.
Yes.
Like, if I am a founder and I have this brilliant realization while I'm making my morning coffee, I can just pull out my phone, record a raw 2-minute video, and publish it before I even commute to the office.
Right. And compare that to the traditional corporate marketing apparatus.
Oh, it's a nightmare.
It is. That same 2-minute insight would require, a brief, a copywriting phase, a compliance review, a graphic design request, and sign-off from like 3 different vice presidents.
And by the time the insight goes live 3 weeks later, the market conversation has completely moved on.
Exactly. The founder speed is this massive asymmetric advantage.
But the real kicker, and I think this is my favorite concept from Frank's entire thesis, is how this human element collides with the technology. He calls it algorithmic juice.
Algorithmic juice. It is the perfect term for it, honestly, because let's look at the actual architecture of social platforms today, like LinkedIn, X, or short-form video apps.
What are they actually trying to do?
Their primary directive is user retention. They need you to stay on the app so they can serve you ads, period. And how do they do that? By serving content that stops the scroll, initiates a pattern interrupt, and just keeps your eyes glued to the screen.
So a raw, authentic story from a founder fits perfectly.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's a vulnerable post about a near bankruptcy, or maybe a highly opinionated hot take on an industry standard. That stuff generates massive watch time, it generates long, thoughtful comments, it gets saved.
And the algorithm looks at that behavior and categorizes the post as high signal, high value human interaction.
Yep.
So it aggressively pushes that content to a wider audience, whereas a polished, highly produced graphic that just says, download our new white paper,
Gets completely ignored.
right, it gets immediately flagged by the algorithm as low signal corporate noise, and the reach is just throttled.
So you have this triad, right? Biological trust, operational speed, and algorithmic favoritism. It creates an incredible launchpad for a business. But, and this is the huge, but here is where the structural integrity of the business really begins to buckle.
Because you can't scale a human being.
Exactly. As the company scales, the founder's biological limits literally become the company's financial limits.
It's the classic restaurant scenario. Like, you open a tiny bistro, the head chef insists on coming out of the kitchen to personally serve every single table, explain the wine pairing, shake every hand.
Everyone loves it at first.
The early reviews are glowing, it feels exclusive, it feels intimate. The diners absolutely love the chef, but then the restaurant gets popular. The line goes out the door.
And the chef can't keep up.
Right. The chef is still trying to talk to every table, but now the food is getting cold on the pass. The waiters are just standing around helplessly because they aren't allowed to speak for the chef.
And the chef is having a nervous breakdown.
Exactly. And most importantly, you can never, ever open a second location because you cannot clone that chef.
That analogy perfectly captures the operational bottleneck. But, let us extrapolate that into the boardroom for a second. Imagine the conversations happening when this company tries to hire senior talent.
Oh, I can only imagine.
A new marketing director comes in, looks at the dashboard, and realizes their entire lead pipeline is entirely dependent on whether the founder had good night's sleep. It feels like posting on LinkedIn today.
Wow. Yeah.
You just cannot build a scalable, predictable marketing department on the back of one person's mood.
Which brings up the most terrifying reality of all, especially for the listener out there who might be building a business with an exit strategy in mind. Think about the M&A, and the mergers and acquisitions.
It is the ultimate deal killer.
Really, just the social media presence.
Yes. Imagine you're a private equity firm looking to acquire this highly profitable software company. The financials look great, but during due diligence, you realize the sole engine driving customer acquisition is the founder's personal social media account.
Uh-oh.
As a buyer, your immediate thought is, well, what happens on day one after the acquisition when this founder takes their payout and goes to a beach?
Or what if they just deactivate their account entirely?
Exactly. Or what if they say something controversial and get canceled? The revenue pipeline immediately evaporates.
That is a huge risk.
Massive.
Yeah.
Buyers will significantly discount the valuation of a founder-dependent business, or they will simply walk away. Frank notes he has seen brilliant businesses hit a hard ceiling entirely because the founder refused to decouple their face from the system.
Let me push back on this, though, because, as a consumer, I am exhausted by the faceless corporate void.
Oh, we all are.
I hate interacting with a brand handle that sounds like it was written by a legal committee. If we transition away from the founder's face, aren't we just inevitably sliding backward into that sterile, boring B2B corporate speak that nobody actually wants to read?
Yeah.
Doesn't a modern brand essentially require a human mascot?
That is the knee-jerk fear every founder has when they first read this blueprint.
Right.
But Frank is incredibly precise about this distinction. Transitioning to brand-led social is emphatically not about retreating into the corporate void.
Okay.
It is not about the founder vanishing into the shadows or scrubbing human elements from the feed. He advocates for a transition to a hub-and-spoke ecosystem.
Okay, break down that hub and spoke dynamic for me. How does that keep the brand feeling alive?
Well, in the early days, the founder is both the hub and the only spoke. They're doing all the educating, all the entertaining, and all the selling.
Right.
But in the mature model, the brand account becomes the central hub. It's the permanent, searchable repository of truth, frameworks, and evidence.
And the spokes.
The spokes are the varied voices orbiting that hub. You've got the executives, the product engineers, the customer success managers, external partners, and yes, the founder is still a very loud, very prominent spoke.
Okay, I see. So you aren't silencing the founder at all. You are just relieving them of the burden of being the entire infrastructure. You are surrounding the buyer with a chorus of voices instead of just one exhausting solo.
Exactly the point. You ensure continuity. If the founder is offline for 3 weeks closing a Series B funding round, the Brand Hub is still publishing deep dive case studies. The lead engineer is still posting technical teardowns.
And the customer success lead is still answering objections.
Yes, the ecosystem hums along completely independently.
Okay, the vision is beautiful. A rich, decentralized, highly profitable ecosystem. But if you are listening to this right now and you are the one responsible for making this happen, you know you cannot just log into the corporate accounts next Tuesday and declare, we are an ecosystem now.
No, absolutely not.
If you try to force this transition without a safety net, you will destroy your organic reach overnight. Frank lays out a rigorous set of prerequisites, right? Infrastructure that must be poured into the foundation before the founder is allowed to take even half a step back.
Yes, these prerequisites are all about establishing absolute clarity. Because, when a brand is ambiguous, it requires a human face to constantly interpret it for the audience.
That makes a lot of sense.
So the first piece of infrastructure is achieving ruthless positioning clarity. Frank defines this as the ability to state exactly who you serve, the precise problem you solve, and why your mechanism is entirely unique, all contained within a single, undeniable sentence.
That sounds simple on paper, but think about how many companies fail this instantly. Let's invent a hypothetical company right now to track this through.
Okay, let's do it.
Let's say we have a B2B SaaS company called FlowState. If FlowState's positioning is, we provide innovative workflow solutions to help businesses scale, that means absolutely nothing.
Right, it is a completely wishy-washy word salad.
And because it means nothing, FlowState's founder, let's call her Sarah, has to get on camera every single day to explain to people what the software actually does, who it is for, and why they should care.
Sarah becomes the human translator for a broken brand message.
Exactly. But if FlowState's positioning is, we automate compliance documentation for mid-market logistics firms so they survive regulatory audits, boom. The brand can stand on its own. It doesn't need Sarah's charisma to make that compelling to a logistics CEO.
Spot on. And once that single sentence is locked in, the next structural leak you have to plug is audience fragmentation.
What do you mean by that?
You have to stop speaking to the nebulous concept of the industry or the world. The brand infrastructure demands that you isolate 2 to 4 distinct customer segments.
And we are not just talking about lazy demographic personas here, right? Like marketing manager Mary, who is 35 and likes yoga.
Far from it. Frank's framework requires deep behavioral and psychological segmentation. You need to map out their exact daily pain points, the specific outcomes they're being pressured by their board to achieve, and most importantly, their hidden objections.
The reasons they wouldn't buy.
Exactly. Why would they not buy your product? The brand's messaging architecture has to be built to speak directly to those highly specific anxieties.
Which flows perfectly into the third piece of the safety net, establishing rigid content pillars.
Yes.
Because if you want the brand to survive without the founder's gravity, it needs to dominate a very small, very specific set of repeatable topics. And this isn't just a branding exercise. This is a survival tactic against the algorithms.
This is where we get into the hidden mechanics of how these platforms actually distribute content. Frank relies heavily on the concept of pattern matching.
Pattern matching. Okay. Unpack that.
Both the artificial intelligence behind the social feed and the human psychology of the marketplace are constantly trying to put you in a box. The algorithm functions like a stressed-out filing clerk. It wants to look at your account, instantly recognize what category of information you provide, and then deliver your content to the users who historically engage with that specific category.
Okay, so if FlowState posts a deep dive into logistics compliance on Monday, a motivational quote about leadership on Tuesday, a meme about coffee on Wednesday, and a generic tech news update on Thursday,
The filing clerk throws its hands up in the air.
the algorithm completely abandons you.
Yes, it cannot confidently pattern match your account, so it stops risking impressions on your content entirely.
Wow.
By severely narrowing your content pillars to just 3 or 4 highly specific themes, you are actually training the algorithm. You're feeding it consistent, predictable data so it can confidently match your brand with the exact buyers who care about those topics.
So you sacrifice broad, shallow reach in exchange for narrow, deep penetration. But it is the fourth prerequisite that I find the most fascinating, and frankly, the one I am most skeptical of. Frank insists that before the handoff, you must codify a minimum viable brand voice.
The MVBV.
Yeah. The goal is to translate the founder's unique tone into a set of guidelines that a team can actually execute. But let me challenge this head on.
Go for it.
If I am the marketing manager at FlowState and I am told to create a brand voice document, I am going to open a PDF, pick our corporate hex colors, choose our font, and write a list of generic rules like be professional but approachable and do not use swear words.
A classic style guide.
Right. How does a PDF full of arbitrary rules prevent the brand from sounding like a robotic compliance manual? How is this not just the ultimate creativity killer?
Well, it becomes a creativity killer when the rules are purely aesthetic. Frank makes a crucial distinction here. A minimum viable brand voice is not about typography or policing slang. It is an operational mandate.
Okay, an operational mandate.
It is about defining behavioral stances. You are not telling the writers what words to use. You are dictating how the brand must behave in public.
Give me a concrete example of a behavioral stance versus an aesthetic rule.
Sure, a standard corporate aesthetic rule is use an encouraging tone. That is entirely subjective and almost always leads to bland, generic copy.
Yeah, totally.
But Frank's behavioral rules look like this. The brand always educates with a strong point of view. Or, more specifically, the brand must demonstrate verifiable proof within 72 hours of making any bold market claim.
Oh, wow.
Or, my personal favorite, the brand never ever masks a direct sales pitch inside a generic inspirational story.
That is a massive paradigm shift. Demonstrate verifiable proof within 72 hours is not a copywriting suggestion. It is a literal workflow protocol.
Exactly.
If a junior writer drafts a bold tweet claiming that FlowState saves logistics companies 40 hours a week, the behavioral rule forces that writer to follow up by Wednesday with a screenshot of a time-tracking dashboard or a quote from a logistics manager.
Yep.
It forces the brand to act like a rigorous expert, not just a cheerleader.
Precisely. You are extracting the founder's gut instincts, the way they naturally demand proof, the way they naturally reject fluffy marketing, and you are turning those instincts into a hard-coded operating system for the entire marketing department.
That is brilliant.
Frank notes that when a company rigorously applies these four infrastructural elements, the positioning, the segments, the pillars, and the behavioral voice, the brand account stops sounding like an endless, desperate sales page.
It gets a real personality.
Yes. Within 30 to 45 days, it actually begins to sound like an entity with a distinct, valuable perspective.
Okay, let's say FlowState has done the agonizing internal work. The safety net is built, the avatars are mapped, the behavioral rules are printed and taped to all the writers' monitors.
The hard part is done, right?
You would think. The temptation for Sarah, our exhausted founder, is to finally exhale, hand over the login credentials to the marketing director, board a plane to the Bahamas, and say, the brand is in your hands now, I'll check in next month.
And if she does that, the marketing director will be fired by the time she lands.
Yeah, really? Why?
Because the organic reach will have absolutely cratered.
Okay, this brings us to the most perilous moment in the entire process. The engagement cliff. Why does a hard, abrupt handoff trigger such a catastrophic drop in metrics?
Because you are violently shocking the system. Think about it. If an audience and the algorithm tracking them is accustomed to seeing Sarah's face, hearing her specific cadence, and engaging with her personal stories.
Right.
And then overnight, that feed is replaced by branded infographics and white paper links. The audience stops scrolling. They stop saving. They stop commenting.
They just tune it out.
Exactly. And the algorithm registers this sudden drop in engagement velocity as a signal that your content is suddenly irrelevant. So it pulls the emergency brake on your organic reach.
So a light switch approach is basically corporate suicide.
It is.
How do we manage this transition so the algorithm doesn't notice the bait and switch?
It has to be a meticulously staged, gradual ratio change, orchestrated over a period of several weeks, sometimes even months. You do not just swap the content, you strategically migrate different types of content at different times.
Interesting. What moves first? What is the vanguard of this migration?
You begin by migrating the permanent or evergreen content over to the brand account. We are talking about the core intellectual property of the business.
Like the frameworks.
Exactly. The foundational frameworks, the deep dive product explanations, the detailed customer case studies, and the overarching philosophies.
But why move the heavy academic stuff first?
Because that content is highly valuable, but it is entirely wasted on a personal feed.
Wait, really? How so?
Think about it. If Sarah posts a brilliant 2,000-word breakdown of a logistics compliance framework on her personal feed today, it is incredibly useful. But 3 weeks from now, it is buried under 20 other posts.
Oh, right. It's lost to the void.
Exactly. That foundational knowledge needs to live permanently on the brand's hub, where it is easily discoverable, searchable, and can be pinned to the top of the profile forever.
That makes total sense. The brand account becomes the library. But while the brand is taking over the heavy lifting of educating the market on the basics, what is Sarah doing? Is she just posting photos of her morning commute to keep her account active?
No, her role actually elevates. As the brand account absorbs the burden of foundational education, the founder pivots to focus almost exclusively on what only a human being can do authentically.
Which is?
She leans heavily into sharing raw, lived experiences. She posts strong, controversial hot takes on industry news. She focuses on relationship building and community interaction.
So she stops being the teacher.
Exactly. She stops wasting her limited personal capital re-explaining what the software does, and instead uses her platform to challenge the status quo and ignite real conversations.
The founder shifts from being a textbook to being a provocateur. But let's get into the messy reality of the marketing department during this transition. If you are the social media manager overseeing this gradual shift, your dashboard is still going to look terrifying for the first few weeks, right?
Yeah, absolutely terrifying.
Frank dives deep into the underlying math of the algorithm to explain why you really have to hold your nerve here.
This is where we have to delineate between the vanity metrics that stroke the ego and the leading indicators that actually predict revenue. Algorithms are fundamentally optimizing for two distinct variables: surface area and signal.
Surface area and signal. Okay, let's break those down because this is the language you need to use to defend your strategy to a panicking CEO. What is surface area?
Surface area is pure volume, consistency, and ubiquity. It is simply how many times your brand's name, in any form, crosses a prospect screen in a given week.
Okay, simple enough.
When the founder reduces their output of everyday educational content to focus only on high-leverage hot takes, the company is inherently losing surface area. So, to prevent the algorithm from thinking your company is dying, you must perfectly offset that loss by increasing the publishing volume of the brand account and eventually the team accounts. The total aggregate output of the entire ecosystem cannot dip.
But just blasting the feed with brand posts to maintain volume isn't enough, right? Because if nobody cares about those brand posts, your signal drops to zero.
Exactly. Signal is the behavioral strength of the audience's reaction. And we have to be brutally honest here. A passive like on a founder's selfie is incredibly weak signal.
It takes zero effort.
Zero. It indicates almost zero buying intent. Strong signal is when a user actively saves a post to their private bookmarks, when they share it via direct message to a colleague, or when they leave a 100-word comment detailing their own experience with the problem.
I use this analogy when talking to founders who are addicted to their personal engagement metrics. You have to stop evaluating your marketing diet based on the sugar high.
A sugar high. I love that.
Right. Because when Sarah posts a slightly controversial opinion on leadership and she gets 1,000 likes and 50 comments saying, "So true, Sarah," that is a sugar rush. It spikes her dopamine, it makes her feel famous, but it burns off in an hour and it doesn't close any enterprise software deals.
Hold on.
But when the Flow State brand account posts a highly technical, deeply unsexy checklist for passing a logistics audit, it might only get 30 likes. But if it gets 40 saves from compliance officers who are bookmarking it for their Monday morning meeting, those are the complex carbohydrates.
Yes.
They aren't flashy, they don't stroke the ego, but they slowly digest into a multi-million-dollar sales pipeline.
That analogy perfectly encapsulates Frank's insistence on tracking leading indicators. You have to aggressively pivot your internal reporting away from total likes and total views.
So what are we looking at instead?
The only metrics that matter during this handoff are saves per impression and profile visits per impression.
So if Sarah calls a panicked all-hands meeting because her personal likes are down 40% this month, the marketing director can pull up the dashboard and say, yes, your sugar high is over, but the brand account saves per impression are up 300%. We are trading fleeting attention for actual banked trust.
And Frank's data shows that this deeper, signal-based engagement on the brand account actually bounces back and stabilizes much faster than the time it would take to recover lost vanity metrics.
Wow, really?
Yes, if the complex carbohydrates hold steady, you are successfully migrating the audience's dependency from the founder to the system.
Anticipating that specific anxiety is so crucial for actually surviving the transition, but let's get into the choreography of what you are actually posting across these accounts. How do you construct a narrative that physically transfers the feeling of trust from Sarah's face over to the Flow State corporate logo? That feels like trying to catch smoke.
It does feel like that, but it is not a mystical process. It is a highly mechanical, meticulously designed sequence. Frank outlines what he calls the least messy way to hand off trust, and he structures it like a relay race that plays out over a concentrated timeline, typically a single-week cycle.
A relay race, okay.
You have to consciously design a sequence of curated moments where the market watches the founder explicitly defer to the brand's authority.
Walk me through this relay race. Let's look at a hypothetical week for flow state. It's Monday morning. Who has the baton?
Step one is the ignition phase, and the founder always takes the first leg of the relay. On Monday, Sarah publishes a piece of content that defines a massive bleeding neck problem in the industry, and she clearly articulates the stakes. She uses her personal credibility to draw a crowd and point at the fire.
So she says something like, logistics companies are bleeding millions in hidden compliance fines because their data is siloed. She lights the match. Then what?
Step two happens on Tuesday. Sarah passes the baton directly to the brand. The brand account publishes a comprehensive piece of content that takes Sarah's abstract warning and turns it into a concrete, solvable formula.
Oh, I see.
The brand provides the hard data, the frameworks, and the structured evidence of a solution.
So the brand account posts the 3-step data unification framework to eliminate compliance fines, complete with a downloadable architecture map. Who takes the baton on Wednesday?
Step three is where the ecosystem expands. The baton is passed to the team. A specific operational team member, let's say FlowState's lead solutions engineer, publishes a post discussing the gritty reality of actually delivering that framework.
The gritty reality.
Yes. They talk about the friction, the integration hurdles, and from the trenches perspective of implementing the brand's solution.
They ground the lofty framework in actual messy reality, which builds immense credibility. And the anchor leg, who brings it home on Thursday?
The baton is passed entirely outside the company. Step four is external verification. A partner, an industry analyst, or ideally, a current customer, provides independent validation.
Nice.
They share a case study or a testimonial that verifies everything Sarah, the brand, and the engineer just spent the last 3 days claiming.
Ignition by the founder. Concrete formula by the brand. Delivery reality by the team. External verification by the market. That is an incredibly elegant, inescapable trap of logic.
It really is. And consider the underlying psychology of this sequence. It perfectly mirrors the chronological process of human persuasion.
Oh, so?
When a buyer encounters a new concept, they first need a clear definition of the problem to know if they should even care. Once they care, their skepticism kicks in, and they demand structural evidence that a solution actually exists.
Which is the brand's post.
Right. Then, once they see the evidence, their operational fear kicks in, and they want testimony from the people actually building the solution.
The engine.
Yep. And finally, before they actually sign the check, their financial fear kicks in, and they require independent proof from someone who has already taken the risk.
The relay system systematically dismantles every single layer of skepticism.
Yes, and Frank breaks down exactly how different types of trust assets deployed by the brand account neutralize specific buyer fears.
Give me some examples of those assets.
Sure. For example, customer proof like detailed before and after metrics with strict context neutralizes the fear of, will this actually work for my specific edge case?
Got it.
Third-party validation like sharing screenshots of an analyst report neutralizes the fear of, is this company a fly-by-night scam?
Right.
Product evidence like unedited 10-minute teardowns of the software interface neutralizes the fear of, is this product full of bugs?
Right.
And behind-the-scenes content like publishing the actual onboarding checklist the team uses neutralizes the fear of, are these people going to drop the ball after I sign the contract?
The overarching theme here is that the primary goal of the brand account is absolutely never to go viral.
Never. Viral reach is a byproduct, never the goal. The exclusive goal of this specific content architecture is the systematic reduction of uncertainty.
That's powerful.
Frank is uncompromising on this point. Removing risk from the buyer's mind is the fastest possible vehicle for transferring trust. You do not build trust by being the loudest. You build trust by providing the mundane, unsexy details that prove competence.
You share exact time frames.
You share the limitations of your product.
Yeah.
You explicitly state who your product is not a good fit for.
This leads to a profound operational rule of thumb that emerges from Frank's relay system. The brand account fundamentally transforms into a comprehensive knowledge base, while the founder account transforms into an ignition switch.
That mental model is what allows the marketing team to actually scale production. But the natural question every executive asks is, well, if I commit to this complex relay race, how long until I see a return on this effort? When does a brand actually start carrying its own weight?
Because right now, the founder is carrying 90% of the pipeline. If we start this sequence on Monday, how many weeks of this do we have to endure before the dashboard looks healthy again?
Well, according to Frank's data set, and he's observing this exact handoff across hundreds of B2B companies, the turnaround is shockingly rapid.
Really? How rapid?
He states that if you maintain the discipline of the relay, the brand posts should begin to match and frequently outperform the founder's posts in those critical leading indicators, the saves and profile visits, within just 4 to 8 weeks.
4 to 8 weeks. You were talking about completely rewiring the psychological dependency of your market in less time than it takes to design a new corporate logo.
It is rapid, but it requires absolute consistency. And there's immense macro-level data supporting why building this deep evidentiary knowledge base is the only way forward for modern B2B brands.
What kind of data?
The source material highlights the 2024 Edelman LinkedIn B2B Thought Leadership Report. It is a massive study surveying nearly 3,500 management-level professionals.
Let me guess the outcome here because it feels counterintuitive to the whole founder magic narrative we started with. Do these C-suite buyers actually prefer the dry corporate white papers over the founder's entertaining hot takes?
It is exactly the opposite of the traditional corporate playbook, but with a twist. They crave thought leadership, yes, but they demand that it be anchored in verifiable evidence, not just charisma. The survey found that a staggering 7 in 10 decision makers explicitly agree that consistently producing high-quality, deep-dive thought leadership is a significantly more trustworthy basis for assessing a company's capabilities than traditional marketing materials or feature sheets.
7 in 10. That means 70% of the people holding the actual budget authority are actively ignoring your glossy PDF brochures and your perfectly produced promo videos.
They don't care about them.
They are looking for the complex carbohydrates. They want to see the architecture maps and the honest teardowns. This definitively proves why the brand account must transition into a knowledge base. If your brand handle is just a digital billboard for press releases, you are actively alienating the vast majority of your buyers.
Which is why the hub-and-spoke model is not just a neat organizational trick, it is an economic imperative.
Right.
But, executing this brings us to the most difficult hurdle in the entire blueprint.
Right, the reality of the office floor. Because this relay system sounds like an elegant symphony in theory. You have Sarah igniting, the brand explaining, the engineer executing, the customer validating. But in practice,
It's chaos.
you are asking a marketing director to manage multiple employees, wrangle external partners, and coordinate with the founder, all across different platforms in real time. How on earth do you manage a choir of 10 different loud voices without the brand sounding completely schizophrenic?
Yeah.
Or worse, how do you prevent an enthusiastic junior engineer from accidentally triggering a massive PR disaster by saying the wrong thing on LinkedIn?
This specific operational chaos is exactly why most small businesses retreat back to the safety of founder-led social after trying to scale for a month. To scale voices without scaling risk requires an exceptional, ironclad system of governance.
Governance.
It requires capturing the founder's innate, unspoken instincts and brutally institutionalizing them.
But how do you capture a gut feeling? How do you institutionalize Sarah's instinct for what sounds right?
Frank's method for this is brilliant in its mechanical simplicity. You do not hold a brainstorming workshop with sticky notes.
Thank goodness.
You conduct a forensic data audit. You export 30 days of the founder's highest performing past social posts into a spreadsheet, and the marketing team rigorously analyzes every sentence. You are looking for repeated motifs, specific sentence structures, and crucially, you identify what Frank terms the perpetual villains.
Perpetual villains. That is such a cinematic way to frame brand strategy. Walk me through how you extract a villain from a spreadsheet of old tweets.
Well, you look for the concepts that trigger the most emotional friction in the founder's writing. A perpetual villain is almost never a direct competitor. You aren't naming names.
Right.
A perpetual villain is an abstract industry concept, a lazy mindset, or a broken standard that actively harms the customer. For example, if you analyze Sarah's posts, you might notice she constantly rails against the hidden tax of data silos.
Okay.
Or she attacks the concept of buying software based on feature lists instead of workflows. Or she constantly mocks the idea of hustle culture.
Ah, I see. So if Sarah's innate personal enemy is data silos, that abstract concept becomes a sanctioned core villain for the entire Flow State brand to systematically dismantle.
Exactly. You discover those villains in the audit, and then you translate them into strict, enforceable boundaries for the entire team. You establish your defining opinions, you isolate the specific language habits the brand uses, and you create what Frank calls the forbidden fruit in the absolute never say list.
So the governance isn't just stay on message. The governance is. Flow state believes that data silos are the enemy of growth. We will always choose clarity over cleverness. We will never use the phrase synergize, and we will never attack a competitor by name.
Frank explicitly states that defining these negative boundaries is where small businesses find their fastest operational wins. When the brand voice is defined by a set of concrete, binary choices rather than a vague aesthetic feeling, you can distribute content creation across a team of 5 different writers without creating dissonance.
Because everyone knows the rules.
Every single writer knows exactly where the edges of the playing field are.
But even with rules, you need a physical pipeline to move the content. You cannot have 10 employees just logging into the Hootsuite account whenever inspiration strikes. It would be anarchy.
Which is why you have to build a highly structured, linear pipeline. The system begins with capturing raw ideas from the front lines. The best content does not come from a marketer staring at a blank screen. It comes from the sales team's call recordings,
Oh, that's smart.
the customer support tickets, the friction points in the onboarding process. Frank notes that these ideas are inherently pre-vetted by the market because they are based on actual current customer pain.
So you create a central Slack channel or Trello board where anyone in the company can drop a raw idea or an interesting customer question. What happens next?
Then the specialized assembly line takes over, designed to minimize endless revision loops.
Yeah.
Person A, usually a copywriter, takes the raw idea from the Slack channel and drafts a hook and the narrative outline.
Okay, step 1.
They pass it to person B, a subject matter expert, or the brand manager who injects the hard data, the frameworks, and the evidence to ensure it meets that behavioral standard we discussed.
Step 2.
Finally, it goes to person C, the designated decision maker, for final approval. 3 touches, and it is out the door.
That handles the evergreen foundational content perfectly. But social media is inherently volatile. Sometimes a massive news story breaks in your industry, or a competitor launches a feature and the team wants to comment on it. Or perhaps you are dealing with a sensitive internal issue. How do you prevent the decentralized team from stepping on a landmine?
You survive the chaos by building a de-escalation procedure long before you ever actually need it. You map out the high-risk categories during times of peace.
What falls into a high-risk category for a typical B2B brand?
The list is standard but critical. Any mention of a direct competitor, commentary on pending legislation, publishing specific financial results of a customer, offering a price or performance guarantee, discussing internal layoffs touching on anything political, or responding to an active PR crisis.
Okay, so if a piece of drafted content touches any of these tripwires.
It is immediately pulled from the standard 3-step pipeline and triggers the de-escalation protocol.
And what does that protocol look like in reality? Does it just go to the legal department to...
That is exactly what you must avoid. Frank highlights a massive operational pitfall here. Sensitive content cannot be allowed to languish in limbo.
Limbo is at worst.
If there is no deadline, executives are terrified to approve it. It ping-pongs between legal and PR, and by the time someone finally signs off on it 2 weeks later, the news cycle has entirely moved on, and the post makes the brand look horribly out of touch.
So how do you force a decision?
The protocol must include a designated senior approver, often the CEO or the CMO, and it must carry a strict, ironclad, same-day turnaround deadline.
Same day.
If the post hits the approver's desk at 10 a.m., they must give a yes, a no, or specific edits by 5 p.m. Frank observes that teams who enforce a strict deadline on the approval process end up publishing vastly more relevant content and engage in far less internal bickering.
Because they have to move.
Right, because the system is optimized for making swift decisions rather than paralyzing the team in pursuit of absolute perfection.
Let's talk about the psychological impact of all this infrastructure on the actual human beings creating the content. Because from the outside, listening to us describe never say lists, de-escalation protocols, and strict governance, it sounds like we're building a dystopian corporate bureaucracy that will crush any semblance of creativity.
It is entirely counterintuitive, but this is one of the most profound insights in Frank's entire philosophy. Without strict guardrails, your internal creators are actually paralyzed by fear.
Interesting.
If a junior marketer doesn't know where the line is, they are constantly terrified of crossing it. They're terrified of embarrassing the founder, leaking confidential data, or exposing the company to liability. So, as a defense mechanism, they self-censor.
They play it safe.
They retreat to the safest, most boring, most generic corporate speak possible.
So the lack of rules actually creates the boring corporate brand.
Exactly. But with strong, explicit, immovable guardrails, the fear evaporates. The creator knows exactly where the edge of the cliff is, they know they are not allowed to talk about competitors, and they know they must use the 72-hour proof rule.
Right.
Because the boundaries are so clear, they can run as fast and as aggressively as they want within that defined playing field. Establishing rigid guardrails is the only way to actually empower your team to be bold, opinionated, and fearless. Freedom requires a framework.
Freedom requires a framework. I love that. Now, a critical part of this framework involves drawing a very sharp line between how the brand speaks and how the individual employees speak. Frank breaks this down beautifully into 3 distinct narrative lanes.
Yes, the ecosystem relies on division of labor. The brand speaks exclusively in evidence, the founder speaks in experience, and the employees speak in role-specific truth.
Let's linger on the brand speaking in evidence. We touched on this with the proof rules, but how strict is this in practice?
It is absolute. For the brand account, any claim related to outcomes requires predefined structural evidence. You have to determine internally what that evidentiary bar is.
Like, does a claim about saving time require 3 distinct case studies?
Yes. Or does it require a specific sample size of users? Does it need to be bound by specific constraints, like this only applies to companies with more than 50 employees?
Okay, I see.
If a drafted post makes a claim but fails to meet that internal evidentiary bar, the governance system catches it. It cannot be published as a brand claim. It has to be downgraded to an opinion or an observation, which means it probably gets kicked over to the founder's personal account instead.
Okay, I have to ask the ultimate operational question here. Because we are dealing with human egos, founders are, by their very nature, visionary, impulsive, opinionated people who like to move fast and break things. That is why they succeeded. What happens when Sarah, our founder at Flow State, wakes up on a Saturday morning with a wild, totally unproven, highly controversial new thesis about the future of logistics? It directly contradicts the carefully curated, evidence-based narrative the marketing team has spent 3 months building on the Brand Hub. Who wins that fight? Does the founder just bulldoze the entire strategy?
It is a totally valid, almost inevitable point of friction as an organization scales. Frank addresses this head-on because he knows you cannot simply mandate a founder to stop having ideas. His solution is structural.
Okay.
First, you have to establish an underlying cultural agreement long before this happens. In a conflict regarding the brand channel, the brand strategy always wins. The brand hub is sacred ground for evidence.
Good luck telling Sarah she can't post her brilliant idea.
Which is why the second part of the solution is non-negotiable. You must construct a designated sandbox channel.
A sandbox?
You create an environment, usually the founder's personal social media feed, or a specific newsletter format where the founder is explicitly encouraged to test wild, unproven, contradictory ideas safely.
So Sarah can go on her Saturday morning rant on her personal X account.
Yes, and the crucial element is that the audience understands the context of the sandbox. They know this is Sarah exploring raw concepts, thinking out loud, and pushing the boundaries.
Right.
Because it is contextualized as a personal exploration, those raw ideas do not inadvertently become interpreted by the market or by investors as official, ironclad company policy. You protect the integrity of the brand's knowledge base while still giving the visionary the absolute freedom to play and experiment.
It is an elegant pressure release valve. Now, to truly flesh out this ecosystem, Frank emphasizes bringing other employees into the mix. So the brand isn't just a 2-person show between the logo and the founder. He calls it building a bench of voices. How do you decide who gets a microphone?
You do not just assign this to whoever happens to be good at writing tweets. You build a bench of 3 to 6 individuals from completely different departments, and you assign them content lanes that explicitly mirror their actual daily jobs.
So you aren't asking the CFO to write visionary thought leadership about marketing trends?
Not at all. You assign lanes based on their inherent authority. An executive, like a COO, is responsible for discussing high-level operational direction, market shifts, and the pain of strategic trade-offs.
Makes sense.
A subject matter expert, perhaps your lead software architect, is responsible for deep, highly technical explanations of how the product is built. Your customer-facing staff, like the head of sales, are tasked with discussing common market objections, onboarding friction, and celebrating specific customer wins.
And what about the community manager?
The dedicated community manager handles the daily conversation loops, jumping into comment sections and connecting people.
Think about the psychological impact of that on a buyer who is researching flow state. If they hear Sarah talk about a vision, then they see the brand account provide the data, then they read a post from the lead architect explaining the code, and then they see the head of sales answering a tough objection in the comments.
It's a wall of trust.
It completely surrounds the buyer with total credibility. It stops feeling like a coordinated marketing campaign and just feels like they are peering into a highly competent organization.
It creates immense structural trust. It proves that the competence of the company runs deep, well beyond the founder's charisma.
Okay, we have built the machine. We have our single sentence positioning. We survived the engagement cliff with a staged rollout. We are executing the trust relay every week. Our guardrails are keeping us safe. Sarah is happily playing in her sandbox, and our bench of employee voices is active.
Sounds perfect.
Sounds like operational nirvana. But eventually, the CFO is going to knock on the marketing director's door and demand ROI. How do we actually prove this complex, decentralized ecosystem is making the business money? How do we definitively measure if we have successfully broken the dependency on the founder?
This brings us to the metrics of success. And Frank argues that during this transition, your standard marketing dashboards are going to lie to you.
Really?
Because your primary goal is survival without the founder. You need KPIs that specifically measure dependency, not just the fleeting dopamine hits of total reach or total likes.
What is the single most important metric to track that dependency?
He utilizes a monthly dependency ratio. It is a brutal, honest audit of your traffic sources. You calculate exactly what percentage of all social-driven actions, whether that is inbound website clicks, newsletter signups, or qualified lead forms, is generated strictly by the founder's personal links versus the brand account and the broader team ecosystem.
And what does success look like on that graph over time?
The goal is for the founder's contribution line to visually cross the team's contribution line, ideally over the course of a single business quarter.
So they flip.
Yes. The founder shifts from being the dominant driver, responsible for 80% or 90% of the action, down to a supportive driver responsible for 20% or 30%. The brand hub and the employee spokes capture an increasingly massive share of the pie, crucially, without the overall size of the pie shrinking.
That is a brilliant, undeniable way to show the CEO that the transition is working. What is the second metric the CFO needs to see?
Brand search lift. This is perhaps the ultimate indicator of cognitive migration in the marketplace. If you are successfully migrating trust from Sarah the person to FlowState the company, you should inherently see more people typing FlowState directly into Google.
Because if I see a great video from Sarah and the brand is weak, I search Sarah FlowState LinkedIn to find her. The power remains with her. But if she runs the relay properly and the brand provides the framework, I'm going to search FlowState Compliance Framework to find the tool.
Exactly. Frank states that if you see a 10% to 30% lift in branded search volume over a 60 to 90-day period following the implementation of this ecosystem, it is a verifiable indicator that the market is beginning to remember and trust the entity, not just the personality.
But attributing all this ambient social activity back to actual closed-won dollars in a CRM is notoriously the hardest thing in marketing. How does Frank recommend connecting this sprawling ecosystem to actual revenue?
He issues a stark warning against relying on the standard default of last-click attribution.
For the founders listening who don't spend their days staring at Google Analytics, break down why last-click attribution is the enemy of this strategy.
Last-click attribution is the traditional tracking method that assigns 100% of the credit for a sale to the very last link a customer clicked before they filled out a form or bought a product.
Right.
It is a fundamentally flawed metric for social media because it entirely ignores the months of invisible trust building that happened beforehand.
Let's trace a buyer's journey to prove this. A logistics CEO watches Sarah's hot take video in January. In February, they read the brand's compliance framework and save it. In March, they see the lead engineer's post. They have engaged with the brand ecosystem for 3 solid months.
Lots of touch points.
But then in April, when they finally decide to buy, they don't click a tracking link on LinkedIn. They just open a new tab and type flowstate.com directly into their browser, or they click a branded search ad.
Under a last-click attribution model, Google Search gets 100% of the credit for that massive enterprise deal, and the social media ecosystem gets exactly 0 credit.
That's completely unfair.
It is. The CFO looks at that dashboard and says, social media isn't driving revenue, cut the budget. It is a complete misrepresentation of reality.
So how do we fix the dashboard so we don't get our budget slashed?
Frank replaces last click with a system of 3 distinct attribution buckets that track the entire journey. Bucket 1 is the first touch metric. This measures signals indicating that social media was the absolute first introduction the prospect had to the brand.
Okay.
Bucket 2 is the assist metric. This looks at signals showing that the social media ecosystem consistently resurfaced the brand, kept it top of mind, and nurtured the prospect in the months prior to the final conversion.
And bucket 3.
Bucket 3 is direct conversion, the actual trackable lead generation from specific posts, which will always be the smallest bucket, but still needs to be tracked.
By tracking all 3 buckets, you prove to the CFO that social media is the unseen engine warming up the entire pipeline, even if it isn't always the final click. Now, obviously, this entire hub-and-spoke strategy doesn't look identical across every single app on our phones. The way a brand behaves on LinkedIn is wildly different from how it behaves on a short-form video app.
Oh, totally different.
Frank breaks down how this handoff manifests depending on the platform's specific context.
Yes, the environment dictates the tactical execution. Let's examine LinkedIn, as it's the primary battleground for B2B companies like our hypothetical flow state.
Right.
The ultimate win condition for a brand handoff on LinkedIn is establishing the company page as an authoritative source that generates saves, clicks, and high-quality comments entirely on its own merit, without Sarah having to constantly share the posts to her personal feed to give them CPR.
Which is incredibly difficult because LinkedIn's entire algorithm and culture are historically biased toward personal profiles over company pages.
It is an uphill battle, but the brand page can win it by focusing relentlessly on proof, clarity, and creating repeatable, downloadable frameworks that the actual sales team can reference and send to prospects weeks after the post goes live.
So the brand page is a tool for the sales team.
Exactly. The founder remains the provocateur in the feed, starting the loud conversations, but the brand page operates as the quiet, indispensable reference library.
And there is a massive new trend on LinkedIn that actually heavily supports this decentralized hub-and-spoke model, right? The era of the pure corporate ad is dying.
The data on this is definitive. The tech cites an October 2024 update from LinkedIn News regarding their new advertising capabilities. They released performance data on thought leader ads, which are advertisements where a company promotes an organic post written by one of its employees or executives rather than running a standard graphically designed corporate ad from the brand page.
What was the performance difference?
Based on an analysis of 67 distinct A/B tests run over an entire year, the thought leader ads generated a 2.3 times higher click-through rate compared to standard single-image brand ads.
Over double the engagement just by putting the message in the mouth of an employee instead of the corporate logo. That mathematically proves that buyers want to hear from the experts inside the building, not just the PR department.
Exactly.
What about entirely different environments like short-form video platforms such as TikTok or Instagram Reels?
On short-form video, the architecture of a successful handoff looks slightly different. The win condition is achieved when the brand account can sustain momentum, ride algorithm trends, and carry the narrative forward without needing the founder's actual face to anchor every single video.
But how do you create engaging short-form video without a charismatic host?
You replace the founder's face with dynamic systems. You lean heavily into rapid-fire customer spotlights, highly edited how-to explainers using screen recordings, deep-dive product demonstrations, and videos that systematically address common buyer concerns using text overlays and voiceovers.
And the metrics for success change here too, right?
Yes. Frank notes that on short-form platforms, the brand account might consistently generate fewer raw comments than a controversial founder hot take. But you don't care about comments here.
You don't.
No. The brand account should be generating far more completion signals, meaning a higher percentage of users watching the video all the way to the end without swiping, and more qualified clicks to the link in the bio.
Okay, we've mapped the platforms and we've fixed the metrics. But if a company truly wants to replace the massive gravitational pull of a charismatic founder, Frank outlines a final advanced strategy. He calls it building a network effect flywheel.
The flywheel.
Yeah, if the trust relay was the engine, this flywheel is strapping a rocket booster to it.
It is the ultimate evolution of the ecosystem. The goal of the flywheel is to completely diversify your distribution away from a single internal personality by turning your content into a massive, collaborative external network.
How do you build that? It sounds like you were just hoping other people share your stuff.
Hope is not a strategy. You actively construct a curated list of adjacent creators, non-competing vendors, industry analysts, or even highly vocal customers who already possess their own established audiences.
And you just email them and say, hey, please share FlowState's new infographic.
Absolutely not. You negotiate a highly structured, very clean value exchange. You offer these partners something they desperately need, highly valuable, ready-to-post proof of concept.
Like giving them your research.
Exactly. You invite them to co-create educational content, or you give them exclusive early access to your proprietary data or frameworks. In return for this premium content, they offer their unique perspective on your material and distribute it directly to their audience.
Oh, I see the mechanics of it now. It is a cross-pollination loop. The Flow State brand acts as the central hub, publishing the core, heavy-lifting asset like an industry data report. The partners then publish their own unique, localized spin on that report to their respective feeds. Then your internal team members jump into the comment sections of the partners' posts to add nuance and answer questions. Suddenly, the partner's audience has multiple different organic pathways leading directly back to your brand hub.
It is a brilliant architecture because everyone gets exactly what they want. The partner gets incredibly high-quality, data-backed content to share with their audience, which boosts their own authority. And you get access to massive, diversified distribution networks without relying for a single second on the founder's reach.
And this isn't just a theoretical exercise in getting more impressions. This approach directly, measurably drives revenue. The text references a highly pertinent piece of research from Deloitte Digital, published in January 2024, focusing on social business transformation.
Yes, they analyzed the financial impact of companies that transition to this exact model. They found that social-first brands, which they define as brands that effectively utilize these interconnected, decentralized social strategies, rather than relying on traditional siloed broadcasting, achieved an average revenue increase of 10.2% as a direct result in 2022.
A 10.2% lift in pure revenue, simply by structuring your social ecosystem correctly and leveraging external networks. That is the kind of metric that makes a CFO authorize budget instantly.
Without a doubt.
And this strategy ties perfectly into the 2024 Edelman Trust Barometer data that Frank includes, which explores who people actually trust in the modern economy.
The Edelman data is the linchpin for why the employee spokes are so vital to the flywheel. They found the global trust in the concept of my employer sits at a staggering 79%.
79%.
Yes, people trust the company they work for, and the people who work at companies vastly more than they trust politicians, media, or generic corporate brands.
Which highlights the immense, often completely untapped power of empowering your employees to speak. If 79% of people inherently trust the voice of an employee over the voice of a brand logo, then leveraging those employee voices as active spokes in your brand hub is undeniably the most efficient way to scale market credibility.
To keep this massive, sprawling, multi-voice machine running smoothly, without everyone constantly asking the marketing director what to do, Frank offers what I believe is the ultimate golden operational rule. It is a simple heuristic for deciding exactly what content goes where.
The 6-month rule. This is the fastest, cleanest way to physically untangle the founder from the business.
The rule is incredibly simple. Look at a drafted piece of content. If this concept, framework, or lesson will still be highly useful and relevant to a buyer 6 months from today, it legally belongs on the brand account. It must become part of the permanent knowledge base.
But if the content is highly ephemeral, if it is only useful or interesting because it came out of the founder's mouth today, like a fiery reaction to a breaking news story, a personal anecdote from a morning jog, or an observation about a fleeting market trend, then it stays entirely on the founder's account.
It perfectly, ruthlessly divines the permanent architectural knowledge base from the fleeting, ephemeral ignition sparks. If you rigorously enforce the 6-month rule, the dependency solves itself.
But as we look at this entire beautiful machine we've built, we have to address the dark side. Because Frank issues a very stern warning about an ultimate pitfall that can destroy this entire transition, rendering all the guardrails and the flywheels completely useless.
It is a critical, existential warning for the brand. The absolute biggest risk when migrating power from a founder to a brand account is that the corporate marketing team, in their desire to protect the company, sacrifices the raw honesty, the friction, and the humility that made the founder successful in the first place.
They scrub it clean.
Yes. They replace it with what Frank brilliantly, devastatingly calls vacuous gaslighting.
Vacuous gaslighting. That is a brutal term. What does that actually look like in a B2B corporate context?
It looks like running a brand account that exclusively posts pithy, unearned victories, ambiguous record-breaking accomplishments, and generic, toxic, positive, motivational nonsense. It is a brand that only ever talks about how flawless, amazing, and universally loved its product is.
Which isn't real.
It isn't. Think about the contrast. When a founder posts, they frequently share their agonizing struggles. They talk about the feature release that crashed, the client they almost lost, and the painful lessons they learned. They show their scars.
Right.
But when the keys are handed over to a traditional corporate account, PR instincts take over, and they scrub all the friction, all the failure, and all the humanity away until the feed is just a shiny plastic wall of perfection.
And modern buyers, especially B2B decision makers, see right through that plastic wall instantly. They feel like they're being aggressively sold to instead of being served. They feel gaslit.
Exactly. And the moment the audience feels that corporate gaslighting, trust entirely erodes, and your algorithmic reach plummets to zero. Frank's fix for this is absolute and non-negotiable. Every single piece of content published from the brand account must be grounded in gritty reality.
It has to bleed a little bit.
It must include the trade-offs. If you publish a case study, you must explain exactly what that decision cost to execute. You must detail what the company had to physically stop doing in order to achieve the result. You must be completely transparent about the heavy effort required from the customer during onboarding.
If you are not publicly discussing your limitations, the friction of your process, and the painful lessons you've learned, you are not building thought leadership. You are just engaging in pompous, transparent self-praise.
Exactly.
Real bankable trust requires demonstrating to the buyer that you intimately understand the agonizing difficulty of their problem, not just celebrating your shiny solution. Let's step back and look at the total altitude of the transformation Frank has mapped out for us here. If an organization actually executes this, if they build the safety net, survive the cliff, run the relay, enforce the guardrails, and spin the flywheel, what is the ultimate evolution of the founder in this new reality?
The fundamental structural shift is that the founder transitions from being the literal content calendar itself, the fragile, exhausting daily engine of production, into being a strategic, high-leverage amplifier. The brand becomes the durable, permanent home base for narrative and proof, allowing the company's marketing and its valuation to survive long past the founder's daily availability.
Let's recap this incredible, complex journey for you, the listener, because we have covered a massive amount of operational ground today. We started by exploring the inherent terrifying paradox of early growth, why founders are absolute magic for getting a business off the launch pad, but eventually morph into a crushing single point of failure that throttles long-term scale and actively destroys the sellability of the company.
We then mapped out the vital, non-negotiable infrastructure required before transition can even begin. The 4 prerequisites of razor-sharp positioning clarity, defined behavioral audience segments, algorithm training content pillars, and a behavioral, action-oriented, minimum viable brand voice.
We discuss how to survive the terrifying algorithmic engagement cliff by executing a meticulously staged rollout, shifting the heavy evergreen knowledge to the brand while the founder is freed to focus on high-leverage hot takes.
And we broke down the deep psychology of the trust relay, how to systematically pass the baton from founder ignition to brand evidence to employee reality to external customer proof, neutralizing every layer of buyer skepticism along the way.
And crucially, we examine the strict data-driven governance and guardrails necessary to empower an entire decentralized team to speak on behalf of the brand fearlessly. We explored how defining perpetual villains and enforcing strict de-escalation protocols ensures that scaling your voices doesn't lead to a PR disaster or dilute the core narrative into corporate mush.
Doing this correctly, as Frank Heidenreich so masterfully outlines in his Whoop social blueprint, completely transforms the entire nature of your social media marketing. It changes it from a fragile, anxiety-inducing daily scramble for dopamine and likes into a compounding, durable, highly predictable, revenue-generating asset.
An asset that actually survives your vacations, survives sudden illnesses, and survives those chaotic, beautiful, busy seasons where the founder needs to go totally offline to actually run the business.
It is about building an engine that remains profoundly human-fueled by real experiences, real scars, and verifiable proof, but is no longer structurally brittle.
Which leaves us with a final, lingering thought for you to explore as you go about your week, whether you are managing a team or building your own empire. Think about your absolute favorite brands today, the companies you buy from repeatedly, the software you rely on, the brands you genuinely trust the most with your money. Ask yourself, Do you even know who their founder is anymore?
It's a great question.
And if you don't, is that a sign that the founders somehow lost control of their company? Or is it the ultimate, undeniable proof that the founders succeeded in building something immortal? That they built a system, a knowledge base, and a trust relay so perfectly designed and flawlessly executed that it no longer needs its creator's face to survive and thrive? Keep an eye on the brands you follow in your feed this week. Look past the polished logos and see if you can spot the trust relay operating quietly in the background.